This is the first of a series of video lessons dedicated to James Joyce and Virginia Woolf and the stream of consciousness. The reason why I've decided to analyze comparatively these two authors is because they are contemporaries. They were both born in 1882 and died in 1941, and also because they can be labeled as the two 20th century authors who exemplified stream of consciousness, which is a subjective narrative technique more concerned with the investigation of the inner human existence rather than the social aspects of the outer world, because fragmented space and time and deep analysis of the individual subconsciousness allowed them to portray the indefinite flow of time between past and present that truly occurs in the individual's mind and that had suddenly become urgent to underline. In order to understand this new urgency, it is important to take into consideration two main aspects. In the first place, the historical events that had a great impact on literary development during this time, and in the second place, the studies of psychoanalysis and the new philosophical theories that developed. We will first take a look at the historical aspects. The two main events that had a strong impact, as we've said, are World War I and World War II. World War I because it lasted much longer than expected and had horrible consequences. First of all, the unbelievable number of casualties. Something like 37 million people died during the war, including civilians and not just military. And this is important because for the first time in history, civilians were heavily involved in the war, not because they were in the front lines, but because of the new destructive weapons that had been developed in time, and especially the airplane attacks that destroyed many cities and therefore affected directly the inhabitants of those cities. But along with this aspect, we must also take into consideration the appalling conditions of soldiers. As a matter of fact, the trench warfare, which specifically characterized World War I, caused many soldiers to suffer deeply from permanent mental illnesses. Some even committed suicide, and there were many were traumatized in many different ways, not to mention shell shock, which left lifelong disabilities for them to deal with. But also the repercussions of World War II, which were even worse. In the first place, the revelations of the atrocities perpetrated by Hitler in the Nazi concentration camps left the world dumbfounded, and also the persecutions of all of those who did not fit in the terrible Aryan theory that he strongly believed in, and the preposterous persecutions and the so-called final solutions that concerned 6 million Jews showed the terrible evils that man was capable of, the atrocities and the extent to which they could be carried through. Even today, for instance, when we hear the names of Auschwitz and the such, our conscience is still strongly shaken. This left the world with a profound shattered innocence. Nothing would ever be the same again, and it gave way to a time of deep uncertainty and widespread anxiety, losing any previous faith anybody might have had in scientific progress and technological development because of all the negative consequences that they brought about, or any type of trust in universal well-being. The second aspect that we said needed special attention was also the new philosophical theories and the psychoanalysis studies that were carried out, especially by Freud, that unveils a new, a totally new um, outlook on reality. As a matter of fact, Freud unveils that there is no objective reality if we don't give due consideration to the sum of human experience that make up the whole existence of an individual, whose deep subconscious layers inevitably come to the surface in his or her personal relationship and interactions with others in the outside world. Meaning that, in other words, what Freud is saying is that there is no clear-cut right or wrong, but the way we experience the world is strictly connected to our personal experience and our personal history, which is affected not only by the world surrounding us, but the way we perceive the world surrounding us. Um, of the same opinion is also the Swiss psychologist Jung, who refers to this type of subjectivity as what he calls the collective subconsciousness, through which he means to underline that there is a strong impact on the individual due to our religious beliefs, the way we look and the way we perceive art, history, mythology, and symbolism, which all together have influences on the human mind and the way the individual behaves. This outlook on human subconsciousness is also supported by the French philosopher Bergson, who in turn introduced a new concept of time, which he called the concept of duration, through which he emphasizes the different perception that intercurs regarding time between what the human mind actually grasps and what is meant by mathematical time of science. In other words, it says the duration, says Bergson, is a spiritual experience of time that varies from one person to another, and is also influenced by the situation that the individual is experiencing. Accordingly, the American philosopher William James speaks of the endless flux and infinite change of the inner life on consciousness, flowing like a river or a stream. This is the imagery that he uses, so that reality, according to William James, cannot be given but only subjectively perceived. In other words, every different person has a different way of living through a situation, experiencing a situation. He also says that the present doesn't really exist, but it is actually a combination of past and future, which merge together in the individual's mind. So there is a constant flow of past and future into one another, made up of what we can call a collection of memories, or hopes and wishes, with all their load of feelings, emotions, and perceptions that mold one's inner and profound being. In the next video lesson, we will discuss first Virginia Woolf, because she is the first one to implement and develop the stream of consciousness, which, as we will see instead, James Joyce brings to its extremes.